Yes, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Reverend Sherri's Metaphysical Bible Hangout. I'm commenting. I have to acknowledge my own background because it's just challenging because there's like the baby food in the back and the whatever. But we're here. We're here, and we're about to get down in it and get up on it. My teacher, Reverend Della, would say we're about to press on in it, or what would she say? Oh, goodness. She had a way of expressing it that was just delightful. Those of you that are in the chat room, I'm going to post a live link if you want to join live. We still have some seats available. Constance, I did get your email and replied to your email, so you should have that. All right. So we're in the middle of a series based on Marcus Borg's book, which is Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time. And I have these great offers. So if you want to, is that loading? Display offer. Okay, there we go. All right. So if you don't have a copy of this book, this is the book to add to your library. It's a powerful, powerful book. You know, Marcus Borg was definitely not New Thought. I don't even know if he knew New Thought existed, but his teaching is so powerful and gives such an incredible framework for thinking about the work of Jesus. And so I cannot say enough good things about this work, and to just encourage you to get a copy of this book. Constance says, so happy to be here live. Thank you. You're welcome. We got to figure that out because you should be getting the link. So something must be dropping in your spam mail. Tonight we're going to work from chapter 4, Jesus and Wisdom, Teacher of Alternative Wisdom. And I'm just going to get my little PowerPoint going. So this series is called Do You Know Jesus? Do you know Jesus? And hopefully I have presented some things to make you think. And I am suggesting that perhaps we should meet him again. This is our outline. I've got a couple of announcements, opening prayer. We'll talk about why images of Jesus matter. We'll look at Jesus as a teacher of alternative wisdom. We'll talk about aphorisms and parables and subverting conventional wisdom. And we'll look at how to truly follow Jesus. And we're going to talk about dying to conventional wisdom and waking to life centered in God. And then we'll go to Q&A. So I've got a lot of information. It's going to be jam-packed today, but let's go in. All right. So on the blog, you can follow along. I always write a companion piece to whatever it is that we're studying, and today's piece is how to know if you are really following Jesus, changing the way you think about spirituality. Changing the way you think about spirituality. So I encourage you to go sign up for my newsletter because I send out the blog post once a week on Thursdays, and you can follow along at revsherri.com. Survey. So I have a survey. Now I'm going to put it up. I didn't have it done. Oh, goodness. I didn't have it done in time for the newsletter that went out today, but I do have it available now. And so I'm going to load it. Okay, yeah, all right. So those of you that are, so I don't know how you guys are seeing this because I don't know what the interface looks like on your end of the screen, but it is there. So, and really what I'm asking is that I need your help to improve the Bible Hangout. What do you want to see more of? What things do you want to see differently? What topics do you want me to cover? Just if you can help me understand, and I should have asked a demographic question. I don't know how many men or women. I feel like I got an even-handed number of men and women, but I don't know, and I forgot to put that question on there. Anyway, if you could fill that out, that would really, really help me. If you are... I'm going to put it in the newsletter next week, but if you are coming to this video in the replay or in the live session, the survey is there. All right. Empower the giant within you. So our most recent series was based on the book, What Are You? And I often get asked, for copies of the PowerPoint, which I'm happy to share. But I figure, I can actually turn this into a self-study course. So I'm building a super robust self-study guide where you'll have all the lessons, meaning all of the videos, all of the audio, and then transcripts for that, because sometimes it's easier to like follow along on the written page, all the blog posts, all the PowerPoint presentations, plus I just recorded today a special bonus interview with Reverend Galen McDowell where we just go in on New Thought and this spiritual teaching and what it means for the 21st century. It was a powerful conversation about what it means to stand in your truth and what it means to live a truly monotheistic, only God, not God and only God experience. So right now, my email subscribers, you can pre-order it for only $15. It says it's going to retail for $35. I promise you it's going to be higher than that because one, it's just costing more to put it together, but two, I think that it's worth more for sure in terms of just the value that I am putting in it. So I encourage you, if you're seeing this anytime before December 31st, 2015, to please, please, please go ahead and get your pre-order, because after that it'll be a much higher price. The scriptures for this 6-part series is Matthew chapter 7, 16 through 20. You will know them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thistles? Are grapes Are grapes gathered from thorns, or figs from thistles? In the same way, every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, you will know them by their fruits. If you could just take a moment to take a deep cleansing breath. Let us center ourselves in the awareness of the one power before we begin this experience tonight. I just give thanks and praise for this platform, and I thank you for all the people all over the world that are watching this. And I thank you for the opportunity to be a change agent for good in the world. And I ask, Spirit, that you move through me. I willingly offer myself as a willing vessel to be your conduit on earth. And I ask that you move through me, be my words, be my thoughts, be my feelings, be my guide through this process. You know the material that's been prepared, but you know the message that the people here tonight need to hear. And so I simply ask that your perfect will be done in this class, and that this class be a blessing not just for those that are here live, but for those that are watching and afterwards. Make it so that it has benefit for them. And I thank you because I know that every prayer that I pray is answered. And so this prayer is no different. I let it be so. And so it is. All right. We look at this again and again and again. Images of Jesus matter, right? This is the slide that repeats every class. The foundational claim of Borg's text is that there is a strong connection between images of Jesus and images of the Christian life, between how we think of Jesus and how we think of the Christian life. Our image of Jesus affects our perception of the Christian life in two ways. It gives shape to the Christian life, and it can make Christianity credible or incredible. Now, there's a video, and I posted it on my Facebook page today, and I think that you will want to take a look at it. And I don't know this guy, but I saw him, and I was like, I got to get him for the Bible Hangout. So I think his name is Tim Wise. If you guys know him or somebody has a connection with him, I really want him on the Bible Hangout because his message was just powerful, and it talked about images of Jesus. And images of Jesus that have allowed people to commit atrocities in the name of Jesus. Now, if you just the little bit that we've touched on, and you see what a powerful, subversive teacher of compassion that Jesus is, and he subverted all systems of discrimination, no matter how they came presenting. And the atrocities that have been committed in the name of Jesus it's beyond me. So these images matter. These images are important. And something he said, and it reminded me of a blog post that I wrote. He said, if you think images don't matter, then what you're saying is essentially that advertising doesn't work, and that the billions, literally billions of dollars that are spent annually on advertising is just money being flushed down the toilet. The mind processes information in pictures. So even though I'm speaking words to you, your mind is hearing these words and literally in the flash of a second, not even a second, but like just in a flash, translating them to images, because the mind thinks in pictures. And so what happens is that the images that you suggest to the mind with feeling become a part of your internal conversation. I'll say that again, because we know from, well, everything we've talked about this year in the Bible, but your internal conversation is really your consciousness. What you think about all day long is that internal conversation. It's going on. Most people are asleep to it. And so we're believing the thoughts that are coming up. Most people are asleep to this internal conversation that's going on over and over and over and over and over again, right? The way that advertising works is that they continually suggest an image to you or an idea to you so that they can shift and begin to participate in the conversation that you're already having in your head. And so so if you notice the way that the advertising is set up, it's set up in such a way where it speaks to whatever you think your problem is. And these images are powerful. So how much more powerful is an image of Jesus? It suggests to you everything. Now, I could get into the art and all of that, because if you look at like how Jesus is shown, there's a way that Jesus is shown, and imagery that comes out of the Roman Empire in terms of the picture that is being painted about Jesus. I do not have time to get into that, but that is a fascinating study. And so these images leave an impression and they become a part of your internal dialogue. And then and the thing is that once something is a part of your internal dialogue, you know this if you've ever tried to lose weight, stop smoking, do whatever, but do something that's outside of your comfort zone. You know that it feels like an impossibility sometimes to shift that inner conversation. And you start out good at 7 in the morning, but by 11 a.m. you've had that muffin. Or you start out good at the top of the morning, but by 10 a.m. you've had that cigarette. Whatever it is, that internal conversation. And so whenever you're breaking a habit, it's never just a physical thing. If it was just a physical thing, we could all let go of that. But it's the internal conversation around it. So these images begin to participate in that conversation. So this is why I keep saying we got to subvert the traditional, conventional image of Jesus, because that image has been used to commit some atrocities that even today should embarrass somebody. So I could say more about that, but I'm going to just keep going. So Jesus as a teacher of alternative wisdom. So Jesus's teaching style, the bedrock of his teaching style, are aphorisms and parables. Aphorisms are basically great one-liners. Parables are short stories. They are invitational forms of speech used by Jesus to teach. Now, this is important because as invitational forms of speech, they are not dogmatic and neither are they dictatorial. So they do not come to tell you how to think, right? Or excuse me, what to think, but to tell you how to think. So they don't come and say, this is how it is. It begins to build a picture. And so if you look at the parables, all of the parables are ways for you to think about the kingdom of heaven. All of them, if you just take them as a whole, kingdom of God. Kingdom of heaven is a Matthew creation. The kingdom of God, all of them are essentially painting this kingdom that is full of compassion, that is full of love, that is full of peace, where there is no condemnation, there is no separation. It ain't got nothing to do if you like men and you're a man, or you like women and you're a woman. That's some BS that you've been taught. Let it go, because that's not what Jesus taught. It has nothing to do with some people are dirty or some people are unworthy. There is nothing you can do to make you unworthy of the love of God. You were born worthy of the love of God. And so this is the kingdom that Jesus presents. We talked about this last week, where every image is an indictment of the purity system, which were the social structures of Jesus's world. We've got social structures. We have gone, I'm going to speak about the U.S. I can't talk about anywhere else. But we have gone race mad in this country. I mean, just straight up race mad. Like, seriously. And I have to include us all in it, because we're all a part of this country. So there is no, I'm not in it, it's them. It's those black people, or it's those white people. We have lost our doggone minds. And literally every day there's some nonsense out there. I promise you, Jesus would indict this system of discrimination on both ends. And I want to be clear, because it takes two to have this dance. It takes two to have this dance. And depending on which side of the equation you sit on, you think it's the other person. It's not, it's you. So these forms of speech, aphorisms and parables, they were invitations to see the world in a radically different way. And they come in ways that are, they speak to things that are obvious, but then they invite you to see something different. So Jesus would say, no man can serve two masters. Well, yeah, no man can serve two masters. I can't be at your house cleaning your house and then at your house cleaning your house. I mean, it just doesn't work like that. Somebody is going to get the short end of the stick, because, or both of you get the short end of the stick, because I can't really, divide my time between two masters. But he's trying to get you to see something deeper, because this is a different way to say, choose you this day whom you will serve. That you cannot serve a God that loves and a God that discriminates, because that would mean God is changing, right? 1 minute he's loving, 1 minute he's not. So again, but his way of handling it are these one-liners that are not specific to any particular time, place, or situation, but that have application across the spectrum. It would be the same thing on your job. No man can serve two masters. You cannot serve the master of procrastination and serve the master of productivity. So there's this power in the way that he spoke and in the way that he taught. And these aphorisms and the parables speak to that, speak to his indictment of that system of purity. No man can serve two masters. You cannot serve a God that loves and maintain a system of purity where some people are pure and others are impure. You can't serve. You can't have both. It doesn't work like that. If you're going to have an unchanging God, the one God that loves, then you cannot have the God that discriminates. What is beautiful about these stories, because they're consistently, even though they're not the same stories in each gospel, you have different parables that appear only in one gospel, some in both gospels, but what happens though is that it puts us as close as we can, because of the consistency of it across the gospels, in touch with the pre-Easter Jesus. And remember, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get past the Jesus with 2,000 years of PR and get next to the man who walked the earth. The man who walked the earth taught in aphorisms and parables. The things that these aphorisms and parables do is that they tease your imagination into activity. They tease your imagination into activity. They paint word pictures. They paint word. They're building an image for you to look at. I'm going to check my comments. Oh, thanks, Gina. Gina says she finished the survey. Judy says Tim Wise is the truth. If you get him on the be sure to advertise a lot. Yeah. Look, if y'all know Tim Wise, help me. Oh, Judy says she saw the interview. Yes. Okay. These aphorisms and parables, they tease the imagination into activity. And remember what I said, your internal conversation, think of it like your comfort zone. It is this perpetual conversation that you're having with yourself, many times below the surface. And it is what is creating your world. It's determining how you respond to the things that happen in your world, to the stimuli in your world. It is determining the things that you think of to do. And so if you're going to make a change in your world, the change has to come to your internal conversation. So these images, these word pictures that Jesus paints are meant to interrupt the internal conversation that you are having. And again, we're so far away from the world of Jesus that sometimes we read these stories and they lose the power that they had. Like for example, when he says, you strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Well, a camel is an impure animal. So the idea of swallowing a camel is that essentially to not swallow a bug, which is a little bit of dirty, but you swallow, you go to efforts to make sure you don't get a little bit of dirty, but here you are swallowing a whole camel over in this other place. Leave the dead to bury the dead. This is a way of saying that life that amounts to living, there's a way of life that amounts to living in the land of the dead, which is basically life based on we'll get into this, based on conventional wisdom. That was one that I was looking for. Oh, the parable. I wanted to talk about the parable of the prodigal son, because he uses the imagery of this son going into the far country, spending his money in riotous living, and then landing in a pig pen. And the pig is like the epitome of dirty animals. So he is as impure as you could get. And he gets up and says, I can go to my father's house and basically be a slave in my father's house or a servant in my father's house. And he gets started. And before he even gets good on the road, the father sees him from afar, and the father, representing God, runs to him and puts a robe on him and puts the ring on him and basically embraces him. And so essentially this picture that Jesus is painting is that God embraces what is the so-called impure. So the images that he's using is to tease your imagination. We don't really have that. Depending on who you are, you might be a 5%er. I don't know. You don't eat pig. All right. Hey, I do. So it depends on how you were raised around the pig. I grew up in Texas. Pigs are fair game. But my point is that we don't have those same stringent social codes, so it's hard to think. We miss some of the symbolism in the story. With the parable of the Good Samaritan, it was at least how I had been taught it, where the Levite and the priest that don't stop by to help the man who has fallen. It's been taught, well, they were in a hurry. They were so busy being religious that they didn't have time to help somebody who was in need. But it was about maintaining the purity laws that they didn't become him and touched him. It would have basically tainted them. And so they were so busy upholding the social structures of their universe that they missed the opportunity to be of service to someone. And there are people in our world, maybe it's you, or maybe it's somebody you know, or maybe it's, who knows, I don't know, that are so busy upholding the social structures of our world that you are missing the opportunity to be of service to someone, that you would rather hang on to your prejudice than let it go and let God use you as a channel for good. You would rather spew hate than to let that ignorance go and let God actually use you for good. And so Jesus is giving an indictment of this system. This is why I'm saying that people think they're truly following Jesus and carrying all this hate in their heart. Get out of here. Bye, Felicia. That's what we say to that. Ray says, I have found aphorisms and parables to ignite my imagination and allow me to see and read between the lines and paint a picture for myself. Yes. Yes. That's what it is. It teases the imagination. It suggests more than it says, right? So no man can serve two masters. If you just want to take that literally, you're right. No man can serve two masters. But there's so much more there. And then the other thing that it does is that it invites you to transform your perception. And of course, this brings to mind a verse that Ray brought up earlier, which is Romans 12:2, which Paul picks up, which is to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That it is out of my mind, out of my internal conversation that is ongoing, that my world is created. And so it is only by renewing that internal conversation, getting a new internal conversation, lifting up that internal conversation, that I begin to see the world differently. Nothing new is changing in your world until you see your world differently. Nothing new is changing. And I'm saying this, but please know I work with this. I got stuff happening in my own experience. I work with this. Because it's falling back asleep spiritually, it just feels so easy. It's just easy to do. The work is to stay awake, to continually challenge yourself, to not get caught up, to not fall prey to the conventional wisdom of the time. Another thing about the aphorisms and the parables is that when we read them in the gospel, they are presented at one time. And I thought this was funny. This is what he says on page, hold on, let me find it so I can read it exactly. Okay, this is on page 71, and he says, I first became vividly aware of this while watching a Hollywood movie about Jesus in which Jesus delivered the Sermon on the Mount, which is a collection of aphorisms that cover 3 chapters of Matthew, as a single discourse. About halfway through this scene, indeed probably before that, I wanted to shout, stop, stop! The problem was that there were too many topics, most of them spoken about in an evocative way, and all of them strung together with no space in between. It just could not have happened like that. An oral teacher, especially a master of wisdom like Jesus, would not do that. Rather, the sayings individually require being thought about as provocative sayings meant to lead the hearer to a new perception. They require time for digestion. My first sermon, it was like I was going to pack everything I knew into that one sermon. And it was like a fire hose. And so at the end of the service, it was good stuff. But people were like this. Like, okay. Like, you've got to learn. A master teacher, and Jesus is a master teacher. How do you know? Because people's lives change. And we're still talking about him. That a master teacher knows you can't give people the fire hose. Some of your best students you can't give the fire hose. You got to give them bits of pieces of information. How about this? You didn't get, wherever you are, whatever you're a master of, you didn't get the information in a fire hose setting. So you can't go dump everything on someone because people have to integrate it into their lives. And sometimes you got to say it more than once. I know this for sure in working in a church. You got to say it more than once because sometimes, most times, it don't land. And the thing is that you can say it, but you don't have any control over what people hear. You really don't. You just do not have any control over what people hear. And you work to move yourself into a space where you speak from your center, which is God, but people hear what they need to hear for wherever they are in their lives. And so you have to repeat the things that you say again and again and again so that they actually begin to land. Constance says, I'm laughing at you because I remember doing my first DI lesson, too much, too little time. Yes, I was going to fit it all in, girl. I was going to tell you everything I knew in like, you know, what we do, like a 30-minute sermon, everything. So my point is that you that's just not how it would have been done. These powerful sayings that are transforming your mind, it would have been over and over and over again. So you have to consider the context in which Jesus is teaching. And the same things with the parables. You know, a story that Della has told a lot is a story of her falling in love with meeting Franklin and falling in love with Franklin. And some people were tired of the story, but she would tell the story because there was always something new to be heard in the story. And depending on where you were in your life, you heard different things in the story. And there were some people who were like, okay, I just don't want to hear the story again. But again, as a master teacher, you tell it again because there's something fresh and new. And sometimes people get it in the moment, and sometimes you'll be sitting and thinking, gosh, she told that story all the time, and then an insight will come in that moment. So you never know when the flower is going to bloom. And Jesus, being a master teacher, knew that. So he would have shared this information on a continual basis. Aphorisms and parables challenge the listener to see something different about a thing they think they knew. They challenge the listener to see something different about a thing they think they knew. And it challenges the conventional wisdom of Jesus' time, but it also challenges the conventional wisdom of our time. And so all of what Jesus is doing is subverting conventional wisdom. And I want to talk about what conventional wisdom is. Conventional wisdom is the stuff everybody knows. It is the dominant consciousness of any culture. In New Thought, we would use the term race consciousness. Basically, socially it creates hierarchies, and psychologically it becomes the voice in your head as you grow up. And so sometimes conventional wisdom is good, right? Conventional wisdom says don't cross the street when cars are passing. That's a place where conventional wisdom is good. You should adhere to that. But there are times when conventional wisdom is not good. When conventional wisdom says this is the standard of beauty. This is what is considered pretty, or this is what is considered handsome, or this is what is considered worthy. It's a value system. And he has a whole treatment on this, and I do hope you'll read it. It starts on page 75, and I don't even have the time to go into it. But what happens over time is that we hear this conventional wisdom as we're growing up, and we internalize it. And so it becomes a part of just how we see the world, and it's the voice in our head. And so sometimes it is the voice of our parents. And here's the thing, there's a general conventional wisdom in society, but then there's the conventional wisdom in your family of what is acceptable, what is the right way to live life. And in Jesus' time, the conventional wisdom was the wisdom of the purity system. It was this idea of who was pure and who was impure. Mostly it fell along class lines. The rich were pure and the poor were impure, but not all the time. It also had to do with behavior and a whole lot of other things. So it was a very complicated structure, just like it's a complicated structure in our world. But the thing that Jesus is doing is that he is indicting this system. So the question I asked last week is, what would Jesus say about Chicago and Laquan McDonald? But we got some more craziness this week. So what would he say about that? And it would be an indictment of any system that creates outcasts. Now, your outcasts vary from country to country, but your outcasts would be the people that Jesus would include in his social circle, in the people that he broke bread with. We said last week with the table fellowship, which was an important part of Jesus' ministry, and in that world, who you ate dinner with, who you dined with, meant mutual acceptance. And so for a pure person to dine with an impure person was the equivalent of sitting at the counter, at the lunch counters in the 60s that said whites only. It was a radical move because it completely upended the world. It said this system based on purity is BS, and I won't stand for it. I'm going to insist on a world that is inclusive. And so he had the tax collectors and the harlots and the publicans and whomever else at his table. So if you think you following Jesus and you're keeping alive a system of discrimination, whether it is discrimination based on race or discrimination because somebody in your family got pregnant and they shouldn't have got pregnant, you're not following Jesus. Constance says, we learned the 5 R's: rote, repetition, recognize, relational, revelation. Absolutely. So Gina says, I have fallen victim to the conventional wisdom without even knowing that I had it because it was so ingrained and part of it. Well, absolutely. We walk around, hair texture. We got some conventional wisdom around hair texture. I had somebody tell me, this is probably a cultural thing. I try not to do too many cultural things because I want this to be an inclusive thing, but my folks, y'all gonna know what I mean. I had an Easter dinner at Easter dinner at my house, and there was a brown-skinned girl who had wavy hair. And she was here for dinner, and she said, we were talking about something. And we were talking about someone who was fair-skinned but had tightly curled hair. And she, joking, but, you know, a little bit of truth in there because it's what she believed, was like, you know what, that's just a waste of yellow. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? We've got conventional wisdom in our specific cultures. And if you're following Jesus, you are subverting that. I wrote down in my journal as I was, doing this chapter, it was like, I have been tiptoeing around the fact that I am a teacher of subversive wisdom. And if I am not turning over kingdoms in your mind, I'm not doing my job. It's not a one-time do and be done type of thing. There are layers and layers and layers of conventional wisdom. And all of them, for a life centered in God, have to be done away with. And so that means that family member that didn't do life the way you think that family member should have done life, you're going to have to find a way to let them back in your heart. And you have to find a way to not have a judgment about choices they made for the life force that they were given dominion, power, and authority over. Conventional wisdom. Following conventional wisdom leads to a life of bondage. Because what happens is you have all of these rules about what it is to live right. And when you have these rules of what it is to live right, of course, there's going to be rules that don't fit the way that the Spirit wants to express through you. Following conventional wisdom sets up an external standard against which you will always fall short. Always. And it really doesn't matter who you are. It really honestly doesn't matter who you are. In some way, you're going to fall short, even if you are a part of the so-called dominant culture. Because one of the myths that we have in the black community is this idea that all white people benefit from white privilege. And I'm telling you, this life of a system based on an external standard don't work for nobody. It don't work for anybody. And so it is cleaning up your mind, cleaning up your idea that somehow the struggle. Everybody is working to figure out how to be in alignment with conventional wisdom. And so you get the keeping up with the Joneses and a life of anxious striving where you're constantly trying to live up to whatever the standard is. But the conventional wisdom can only lead you down a path of bondage. It can only lead you down a path of bondage. When you allow the Spirit to flow unimpeded, you move into the overflow. It is impossible to have a life centered in God and live a life of lack and limitation. If you are living a life of lack and limitation, you are not living a life centered in God. I was doing this last night. I'm gonna see if I can find it while I'm talking to you guys. I was I'm writing the DI for the Daily Inspiration, which is the Daily Inspiration is the main publication for the organization that my church is a part of. And I'm writing it for August. And so I was just doing some research because I wanted, what came to me is it was inspired by this lesson, is an entry called Lavish Abundance is the Rule. And this is just a little bit that I looked up. 23,000 different species of bees, 2,000 species of roses, 11,000 different species of moth, 100 different types of trees in the world, 10 billion galaxies in the observable universe, 100 billion stars per galaxy, and the list goes on. So the fear you have of somehow that living a life in God is taking a vow of poverty is not based on the God that Jesus talks about. That God is lavishly abundant. That when he says the kingdom of God is like, and he begins to tell the story of the prodigal son, that even with making the most egregious of mistakes, where he comes from a life of purity and through his own actions puts himself in a life of impurity. And the moment that he turns around and begins the walk in consciousness back to God, you're never separated, but the walk back in your own mind, that the Spirit meets you right where you are and embraces you as you are. That there is, and it's lavish abundance. He's like, throw a big party, kill the fatted calf, get the ring, get the dancers out. We about to have a party up in here. So this idea that letting go of the striving that somehow you're going to now move to a life of poverty is a misunderstanding of God. Lavish abundance is the rule. Lavish abundance is the rule. Constance says, confirmation, just AFF in New York. I love you to life. I love you right back, girl. Lavish abundance is the rule. Following conventional wisdom leads to a life of anxious striving and grasping to achieve a reality that will never truly fit. It don't fit for nobody. Even if you, the white person in the society where the dominant culture is white, it don't fit for you either, and you know it. Conventional wisdom is a life of bondage. Life in this world can be, I'm reading from page 77, can be and often is grim. It is a life of bondage to the dominant culture in which we become automatic cultural persons, responding automatically to the dictates of culture. It is a world of judgment. I judge myself and others by how well I and they measure up. It is a world of comparisons. I may be aware that I am not the most attractive person in the world, but because I am more attractive than some, I am okay. Our identity and self-esteem often depend on these kinds of comparisons, most of which are quite unconscious, but nevertheless very powerful. It is a life of anxious striving, feeling okay or not okay to the extent that we do or do not measure up. Men, you know this. The rules that we have around what it is to be a man, and don't this says I shouldn't do a double negative because my mama might be watching, but don't not measure up to that. I mean, really, that the I can't use that word, but the swinging that goes on in locker rooms and in other social settings where men are, you know what I'm talking about, and women too. Women too. So it's like life according, he writes on page 77, life according to the performance principle is also life according to the conformity principle. And ironically, we try to be outstanding, to stand out by conforming to the standards that our cultures value most highly. Now, here's the big part about conventional wisdom. Go back to my outline. Is that there is an image of God that goes with the world of conventional wisdom, and that image of God is always and primarily as lawgiver and judge. There is an image of God that goes with the world of conventional wisdom, and this is an idea of God that is a lawgiver and a judge, and so you can never live up. You are always falling short. In fact, the first thing people want to quote, we all have fallen short, as if they're worshiping the God that Jesus worshiped. Guess what? They're not. Because the God that Jesus worshiped is a God of unconditional love, no condemnation, and no judgment. Why is it no judgment? Because the God is absolute good. It sees beyond the limitations that you think you have. And it holds the vision for you when your eyes finally open and see the perfection that was already present. This is so Jesus is subverting this conventional wisdom. And so when he comes and says, no man can serve two masters, you cannot gather figs from thorns. The kingdom of heaven is like unleavened bread, or the kingdom of heaven is like, all of these different ways that he taught the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God or God, but this experience that he is turning on its head, this idea of a God that plays favorites. He is turning it on its head. And so this idea that the God that you worship, the way that you worship it, somehow discriminates against other people has got to go. Whether there are other people who worship and use the name of Allah for God, whether there are people who practice Buddhism or Taoism, or whether there are people who so-called call themselves atheists, that in Jesus's view of God, everybody gets a seat at the table, and no one has a seat higher than another. And so this God is a God that is compassionate and that is indiscriminately generous. Indiscriminately generous. This is a God that does not withhold blessings. The moment you give this God your attention, the blessings begin to flow. Now, truth be told, God really doesn't have your attention. All this stuff in the world is what has your attention. And so the thing that you think God is keeping from you is really the thing that you're keeping from yourself. Because all this stuff in the world and your paying attention to conventional wisdom has your attention. So the waking up process is waking up to a God that is always abundant, always plentiful, knows no boundaries, and whose lavish abundance did not stop with you. How to truly follow Jesus. So one of the symbols that you'll see in the New Testament, and people have taken this literally, but that's what people do, is this idea of death. And the death is symbolic, but it speaks to dying to conventional wisdom, because the essence of Jesus's message is to love God with all you've got, which is based on the Shema from Deuteronomy 6:5. And everything in God includes all the people. So, not just the animals. There are people who love animals more than they love people. Guess what? Guess what, my people? Guess what? That's not how it works. That's just not how it works. You got to love all them folk that you angry about, including the ones that are doing harm to the animals. But this death was an image for the path of transformation, and it points to a dying to the world of conventional wisdom as the center of your security and your identity, and a dying to the self as the center of your concerns. Essentially, Jesus kicked conventional wisdom to the curb. So in Jesus' system of God, homophobia, racism, sexism, and any form of creating a system of outcasts must die. And it may take you time. You may not be comfortable witnessing homosexual relationships. So it may take you time to let that conventional wisdom die in your heart. You might have a thing against pick an ethnic group. It may take you time to let your beliefs about that ethnic group that make them less than or impure, to let that feeling die in you. But if you're going to follow Jesus, it's going to have to die. It's going to have to go out the window. You're going to have to get over it and let it go. If you're going to follow Jesus. Now, if you're going to follow conventional wisdom around Jesus, well, go ahead. Keep doing that. But if you're going to truly follow the Jesus who walked the earth, you're going to have to let go of all hate. You're going to have to let go of all discrimination, and you have to let go of this idea that there is somebody somewhere that somehow could be outside of the love of God. That's got to go away. Jesus' ministry was not built on living up to exterior rules. It relied on adhering to spiritual principle, which had nothing to do with being pure or impure. And so Jesus speaks of the narrow path, and it's the narrow path that leads to life. And it is not the path of conventional wisdom. The exterior rules, the thing about exterior rules, like I said, some of them are good. You should look both ways before you cross the street. You should not text and drive, Sherri. All right. Actually, I shouldn't say that because my mama might see that. So I might be in trouble after this broadcast is over. But you should not text and drive. All right. So there's some places where conventional wisdom is good, but the places where they are not is where they begin to speak to values of who's important and the hierarchy of life, where these people are more worthy. There's a book that's written on how corporations became people, meaning treated by the government, as far as like tax laws and things like that, where you begin to rewrite the rules so that it is positioned in a way that is unfair to the ordinary people in the country, just because you can, because you have enough money to lobby for that position. I could speak on gun violence. I won't even pick up that mantle. folks have gone gun crazy and race mad. You know, that there's a level of responsibility that you have. And so it's in those places where conventional wisdom is faulty, and you cannot depend on it. But truly, when you die to it, you are dying to these belief systems, and it takes time to work those things out of your consciousness. I'm sure that there are I work with this on just transparency. I work with this when I am in mixed settings, and sometimes I'm imagining the things that I think people of other races are thinking about me. I don't know what they're thinking, but these things and the thoughts will creep up, and it's like, one, they haven't said those things to me. Two, I don't know what they're thinking. Three, it's not important. The only conversation that matters in my life is the conversation I'm having in my head. So it's that voice in the head is there. And so I know that people who are in other groups that are quote unquote outcast groups, that conversation comes up, that you begin having a conversation in your head about what other people are thinking about you, and it's like you don't know what they're thinking. I mean, they could be thinking that, but you don't know that. And so the cleansing that has to happen is not just a cleansing of the outcast that you consider, but it's also the cleansing of what you think other people are saying about you. And that takes time to shift that. Well, it doesn't take time. It takes persistence in God to shift that conversation. When you work with God, it can change in an instant, but you've got to work with God. So you got to push past your own life distractions, your own limitations, your own things. So anyway, I just want to put that out there. How to truly follow Jesus. So you are waking to a life centered in God. Now, I want to stress this because this is the part that is where I think New Thought gets it right. And I think that we got way more work to do to take this message out. He writes on page 87, it is a challenging message for both secular and Christian forms of conventional wisdom in our time. Our culture's secular wisdom does not affirm the reality of the Spirit. The only reality about which it is certain is the visible world of our ordinary experience. Accordingly, it looks to the material world for satisfaction and meaning. Its dominant values are what I call the 3 A's: achievement, affluence, and appearance. We live our lives in accord with these values, with both our self-worth and level of satisfaction dependent upon how well we measure up to these cultural messages. Not only is the effort to measure up burdensome, but even when we are reasonably successful at doing so, we often find the rewards unsatisfying. We may have the experience of being satiated and still hungry. Perhaps Augustine and others were right when they said we are made in such a way that we have an appetite for the infinite. The signs that people in modern culture often do yearn for something more are many and encouraging. The way of Jesus also challenges many common forms of Christianity, as already noted. In particular, it invites us to move from second-hand religion to first-hand religion. Second-hand religion is a way of being religious based on believing what one has heard from others. It consists of thinking that the Christian life is about believing what the Bible says or what the doctrines of the church say. First-hand religion, on the other hand, consists of a relationship to that to which the Bible and the teachings of the church point, namely that reality that we call God or the Spirit of God. To truly follow Jesus is to reach for an experience with God. So Jesus never asked you to believe in him or simply to believe him. The concept of believe in me, believe on these things comes out of John. And remember, John is non-historical. It's written about the latter part of the first century. And it is this concept that begins to evolve in communities that were continuing to follow the teachings of Jesus. But when we look at the pre-Easter Jesus, the Jesus without the PR, that what you find is a man who is encouraging you to develop a one-on-one experience with the one presence and the one power that we call God. So if you are truly following Jesus, then you are reaching for an experience with God. You're not relying. At some point, you've got to put away the books. You've got to put away the preachers and the teachers and every other external source of information. And you have got to reach for your own internal source. It indwells you. It's there. I promise you it's there. You've got to reach for it. It is fine to listen to the ministers, but I'm not really asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to try it for yourself. I'm challenging you to sit in the silence, to reach for the silence that is at the center of your own being. I'm challenging you to make this a non-negotiable part of your daily experience. I'm challenging you to treat it the same way you treat brushing your teeth. That you wouldn't leave your house without brushing your teeth. Please do not leave your house without at least 10 minutes of silence. Reach for an experience with the divine. If you want to subvert conventional knowledge, this honestly is your only path for doing it. Because in the absence of a relationship with God, you are left to show up for the world the way that you have always shown up for the world. And so you make what appear to be gains on the outside, but really it is you propping it up. And the minute a nice wind comes in the form of whatever is the thing that you deal with, whether it's insults on the job, chocolate being brought into the house, whatever. I don't know what your thing is, what knocks you off your thing. But whatever it is, that when it comes, it upsets the apple cart. And what has not been changed by God returns to form. So if you want to subvert conventional wisdom, if you want to truly follow Jesus, then you must reach for an experience with God. You must reach for first-hand knowledge. Don't settle for being just turned on by what Michael Beckwith says. I think Michael Beckwith is just about as bad to the bone as he can be. I think he's amazing. But don't settle for his experience. Get your own. Johnny Coleman. The reason I even teach this stuff is because this woman said yes to God. But I can't settle for her experience with God. I gotta have my own. And the same is true with you. You've got to have your own. Malayla says, you really like the example of the number. I do like that example. You know why? Because it's so many. Like, I think 1,000 different ones would have been enough. But like 23,000, that's like, seriously? Different species, not number of bees, different species of bees. Something about that is just hilarious to me. Constance says, oh, wow, are you operating based on what you heard or what you experienced? There is a difference, yes. Eve says, listen to the still small voice for guidance. That's it. Reach for it. It's there. It's that I'm in the process of studying. I've been working through the Psalms, and I was looking for it so I could read it for you. And it says, this is the 9th Psalm is where I am. And it says, and those who know your name put their trust in you. For you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you. If you seek, you will receive. No exceptions. If you seek, you will receive. And so you can trust that if you will show up every day, give that 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever you can give, even if it's 60 seconds, if you will show up, it will become a part of who you are. I use this example because it was the most profound example that I've had recently, but on Thursday mornings, I take Jordan to this outdoor class. And when we were first in a class, he was very awkward. He moved like a 18-month-old. He waddled basically everywhere, and it was this kind of weeble wobble thing going on. And and he sometimes he'd fall, he'd run and he'd fall. And this class, we do hikes, and I've put a couple of those pictures on my Facebook page and on the blog, and through balancing on rocks and climbing mountains, but a lot of climbing, but it's like there is this command now that he has over his body, and I didn't really notice it at first because I'm with him every day, so I'm seeing changes, but they're not landing as to what they mean. And it wasn't until I saw him against other older kids, meaning kids who were like 2 and 3, and I saw him, who wasn't even 2, against them, and it was like, wow. And that's just from 2 concentrated hours on a Thursday morning. And so what started as something that was developing in those 2 hours on a Thursday morning then began to spread out into the rest of his life. It's the same thing when you take this dedicated time and give it to reaching for the indwelling source, not the external source, not what you read in the book, not even what you read in the Bible. Your own experience, because the things you read in the Bible is somebody else's experience with God. You want your own. You want your own experience with God. That's why Mary threw that Bible, because people reaching in like, this is God, this is God. No, that's somebody else's experience. Get your own experience. If I had a Bible, I'd throw it. No, I wouldn't. She was way more bold than I was. And maybe I'll get to that place. I don't know. But anyway, my point is that that 10 minutes, what starts as 10 minutes, if it's concentrated and authentic, it will begin to bleed out into the rest of your world. And so it will no longer just be what you come apart for 10 minutes to do. It'll be what becomes your experience. That's the promise. That's the promise of Jesus. Constance says, yeah, right in your Bible. Yes. Jesus did not ask you to believe him or believe in him, neither do I. He did, however, ask you to follow him. And this is a challenge yourself moment. Follow him into a life centered in God. Learn to be still and be moved by your own internal source. And so this is my call to action. Reach for firsthand knowledge of God. Don't even settle for Jesus' experience. Go for your own experience. Reach for firsthand knowledge of God and make your reach a non-negotiable aspect of your day. And finally, if you like this, leave a comment on this YouTube video with your results, because it helps people find this video, meaning when there's interaction on the video. So yeah, thank you guys so much for tonight. Questions? I left the survey up. Ray says you are breathing fire tonight. This series will I can tell you with clarity that I will look back on my journey and say this series meant something, because it clarified for me what I'm here to teach, which is to become a voice in the conversation around Jesus. I feel like this information should be taught everywhere. It shouldn't just be taught in New Thought churches. It should be taught everywhere. And I think it should be taught more in New Thought churches, because it's the indwelling Christ that is your authority. You find that a lot of New Thought churches move away from Bible teachings, even though they all grew out of the Bible. But I don't think that it's throw the Bible away. I think that it's teach your people how to read that thing. encourage them. We have a Bible illiterate society. There was a video that was out that asked people, this was in France, I think, that asked people, you know, is the Bible or is the Quran more violent, right? And so what they did was they put the cover of a Quran on a Bible, and they read verses from the Bible to the people. So people thought that they were being read from the Quran. And it said like different things, you know, you pick a verse that's like violent in the Bible. And so the people were giving their reactions, and they were shocked because they didn't know that that was actually in what they call the Holy Bible and not in the Quran. We just can't afford to be ignorant anymore. And I don't think the Bible is an irrelevant text. I think that people need to be taught how to read it. And I think that pastors need to stop lying to people. That's what it is, and saying that it is the inerrant word of God when you know the human fingerprints that are all through it. Tell the people about that, and then let them make their own decision if it's inerrant for them. But don't pre-qualify it, you know, and then say you can't question it because you're going to hell. No. Constance says, absolutely wonderful and powerful class. At some point, my soul was full, and you brought tears to my eyes. Thank you. That Jesus is so much more. He sure is, girl. That dude, I'm telling you, people sell him short when you concentrate on the post-Easter Jesus. Jesus is so much more, and may I strive to live the life of truth that Jesus taught. Absolutely. I want you to fall in love with Jesus. I want you to fall in love for the right reasons, not behind some mythical Superman, but somebody who showed you how to subvert conventional wisdom, who showed you how to throw off the cloak of culture and begin to live a life centered in God. That dude is worth rolling with. That dude is just, you know, it don't get any cooler than that. So thank you guys for tonight. I don't see any other questions. Thank you so much for tonight. Next week we're on chapter 5. Which starts on page 96, and this one is called Jesus, the Wisdom of God. Now this one is interesting. Okay, so I won't like dig into it because I'm already like over by like 13 minutes, so sorry about that. But Jesus, the Wisdom of God, because essentially Jesus is like Kleenex, right, or Xerox, where, you know, Christ is not his last name, but he so became the Christ in expression that it became the name by which he is referred to. Is that, you get what I'm saying? So you know, a Kleenex, like, that's not what it is. It's a tissue. It's a tissue for your nose. But it became the name that stands for, even though there are other brands of tissue, but Kleenex is what you call it. You don't say give me a tissue, or maybe you do, but a lot of times you'll say give me a Kleenex, and no one is thinking that you're talking specifically about a Kleenex tissue. They know that if they got puffs, that's gonna cover it for you. But it's just where the name of it becomes synonymous with the thing itself. So Jesus is like Kleenex or Xerox or Google, that he so lived the Christ in expression that we now speak of him as the Christ. Malcolm says, what is the name of the person you mentioned at the beginning who you want to, oh, Tim Wise. Tim Wise. If you go to my Facebook page, oh, you could, no, not my personal page, RevSherri.com, the Rev Sherri James on Facebook. The survey. Here, I'll post the link here in here. Yeah, if y'all can help me get Tim Wise or give me a contact and I'll reach out to him. Constance, this is the survey right here that I just posted in there. I will call him and I will do whatever song and dance I need to get this man, do a little interview on the Bible Hangout, because he just lit my world up. I said, look here, get this man in here. So Jesus, the wisdom of God, Sophia become flesh. So this is about yeah, well, I don't know what else to call it, but where you so become it that it becomes the name, right? And even though Christ is not his name, which is why you'll find in our churches or in some other churches, they start to do it too, where it's Jesus the Christ, because Christ is not a name, that it was a title, and it was the Greek translation of the word Messiah, which meant anointed. So Jesus the anointed. All right. Thank you guys for tonight. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great night, and I will see you next week, chapter 5. We'll start again. Talk about Jesus like Google.